Welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast, where we explore the connection between mental health and faith. I'm Dr. Matthew Stanford, neuroscientist, author, and mental health advocate.
And I'm Dr. Madeline Stiers, therapist and trauma researcher. We're so glad you're joining us today. Each week, we have authentic conversations about personal stories, we share professional insights, and explore the meaningful ways faith can influence mental well-being.
Whether you're seeking comfort, understanding, or simply a new perspective, we're here to journey with you. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's conversation. Hello and welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast. I'm Dr. Matthew Stanford, and with me as always is
Dr. Madeline Stiers.
And this episode, we're going to talk about something that we talk about a lot around here, not necessarily with our clients, but just kind of as a kind of recognition of what's going on in our society. And this is this idea of this kind of polarization that has occurred where there's real us and them thinking, particularly in how we don't disagree well with one another and then how that affects our mental health. So that's our topic today. So, we see in our culture, there's often, kind of rewards today kind of for outrage and division. And there really is this kind of us and them thinking. Now, us and them can be defined in many different ways. So it could be men and women, it could be different races, it could be religious and non-religious. I mean, you could just go on and on with all.
Yeah.
But everything is put into a lot of times as us and them. And really, there is no discussion. There's no compromise. There's no debate, no healthy debate. There's just kind of vilifying what we see as an opponent. And also, I think underlying that is this idea that not only am I right, but I am part of the right group. Like everyone really believes what I believe, and you're in the wrong group, and you're in the minority of those beliefs. And so we just see that a lot. I think we see that a lot here in the clinic. I think, people just aren't able to have discussions. And I think we particularly see it a lot in our political system, where, our political system is really based on compromise, which
Right.
I kind of laugh because I don't understand why people don't realize that it's a compromising system. We have representative government where we send representatives from all these different little areas and places, and they get together and they're supposed to discuss things and have debate and discussion, and then they're supposed to come to a compromise.
Shake hands across the party lines.
Right. And then they're supposed to send a bill on to the president who'll sign it or not sign it. But the thing is that if you don't compromise, then nothing ever gets done. And so you see that a lot. And so I think, we wanted to talk about that today and really how that affects us from a mental health perspective, because, I don't care what metric you go look at today or what survey or who you talk to, the mental health in our society today is the worst it's ever been. And it's measurably bad. And so, this is just perhaps this is a contributing factor, or perhaps this is a symptom of that. So what are your thoughts, Maddie?
When I think about this, disagreeing and what that looks like, I really think what we're missing in today's society is the desire to truly understand others. Like you said, there's this mindset of them versus us. And I've already decided that they're not correct. So anything that they say is irrelevant and mute, and I'm not going to listen to it. So people stop listening to each other. They stop having, conversations that are meaningful, and they really dehumanize the other person, right? Like, you're no longer human in my eyes. And they're not necessarily thinking this, but this is what happens is you're no longer significant as a human. I wash you away, right? Like, we kind of just put them in a box and they're no longer important. Look at how stupid that person is. How could they think that? Really without even the intention of wanting to understand the other side and come to some resolution. Or not come to resolution, but not hate each other. The other part of this is I would love to see people have the ability to understand that you can think differently than me. You can have different beliefs.
And you still can be in a relationship.
Or friends, or
absolutely
cordial.
Literally believe different things.
Absolutely.
Completely different, opposite
wildly
things.
different things.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to ask couples who are married, who have been married for a long time, and you were to say, like, hey, do you and your wife, or do you and your husband, or you and your spouse believe exactly the same on every single topic? They'd be like, no. he believes blah, 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 blah. Okay, like
Well,
wildly believes
I can
that. I
say
mean,
that myself.
yeah.
This year I've been married 36 years. My wife and I've been together 38 years. And I I could for the rest of this podcast name things that we don't exactly agree on. And then in some instances I can name, there are few things that we are absolutely completely different in our view of those things. But we have 4 kids and we raised them and we're happy and I
Yeah.
mean, it's not that's being a human being.
Right. But people don't see that now.
Right.
You have to believe exactly as I believe in the exact same way that I believe. Otherwise, how could I ever be in any sort of relationship with you? And really what we're doing is isolating ourselves as a society. Like you're limiting who you're willing to interact with. And you're also limiting your ability to have exposure to education, critical thought, to be able to have these conversations in a cordial manner. And really we just don't see that as much anymore. And it has a negative impact on our relationships, on our mental, like we've said in many episodes. Social support is one of the main contributing factors to good mental health.
That's the foundation of good mental health. And that is what has been absolutely just gutted in our society from any number of perspectives, particularly what we're talking about today is one of those big things. Let me just mention, you can look at this phenomenon from a very kind of mental health perspective. And so in mental health, a lot of times, we talk about communication or even what we sometimes would think of as thinking traps, that kind of thing. And so you can kind of break this down into a whole set of kind of common communication pitfalls, which are a combination of thinking traps and kind of communication mistakes that people make. And so you said something earlier, and that's this idea of like, you just vilify your other, and you're like, they're wrong before we even start having a conversation. So, but assuming, like, one thing is assuming motives instead of asking questions. So the person you're talking to, regardless of what the context is that you're having this conversation about, you already assume certain motives that they have, whether it's associated with what you're talking about. So you've already vilified them or defined them in a way that means that you're going to dismiss whatever they say.
There's no coming back from that. No chance.
So another one would be overgeneralizing. So you might say something like, well, again, you might say that political party, they always X. Like you just overgeneralize. So that means anything they say to you, you just assume this overgeneralization. And so setting up kind of straw man opposing views. I looked one up this morning I thought was a really good example. And that was, and unfortunately, again, it's politics, but it would be like, let's say that, and I'm making this up, by the way, so please don't email. Let's say that you said, I think that we need to reduce funding for the military and put some of that money into something else. And then I come back to you and I say, why do you want to leave our country defenseless?
Right.
So see,
that's not what I said.
That's not at all what you said. But what I've done is I set up a straw man which is just, I've redefined what you said, and now I'm just going to beat it to death. I'm going to tear it apart. Like, if the country's defenseless, then that means we'll be taken over, and then children will be killed. And
so closely aligned with what I said that people will hear your response and go, wow, I can't believe she would have said that. And then start to hear that's what I said. And it's like, it really is a very manipulative tactic.
Another thing is interrupting and not listening fully. So you just you let the person start to talk, and then you just kind of jump right on top of them. So you never allow the person to fully, and I'm really good at this, as Maddie's making a face at me right now. I'm really good at this, but you just jump right in. You don't let them make their point, and you basically redefine their point. And so you win, you always win. You respond to the person to win. I just said it, rather than to understand. You're not having a conversation about understanding. Like, let's talk about this bill, or let's talk about this religious concept, or let's talk about this relational issue. It's more like, I'm just here to win, as opposed to really understand.
And anything that you say, I don't care. I'm going to dig my heels in deeper.
Exactly. I remember, I did like to watch Dr. Phil just for the entertainment, but he used to have this term where he said, you're a right fighter. You're just a right fighter. And that's what he meant with that, was this idea of you're only involved in this interaction because you want to be right. You want to win. you don't really care that it works out, you know. And another one, or a final one, would be you use contempt or sarcasm in the way you interact. So you want to be in the interaction, but it's really because you want to minimize the other person. So you're going to be sarcastic. You'd say, "Oh, well, that's great, Maddie, that you want, you know, all of our children to be, you know, indoctrinated by this other country. That's why you want to leave us defenseless." You
Yeah.
know, it's like you use a lot of sarcasm and contempt in the interaction. So all of these kind of communication pitfalls, you see those in these interactions. And so one of the things I would say to people out there is, you know, to kind of keep yourself from falling into this, you got to watch for this stuff. You got to watch it in yourself and you got to watch it in others, because that kind of a conversation is not a conversation. It's really it's not even a debate. A debate is a legitimate thing. Debate is healthy. Healthy debate is healthy, where you're actually giving each one your point and you're kind of trying to talk about why. This is just trying to tear another person down and show that they're less than you. It's us and them. You don't want to get into us and them. I mean, in America, I know we love to talk about there's lots of us's and them's, but the reality is there is no us and them. There's just us. We can make it us and them, but there's just us, and we don't agree with on things. And that's how it is everywhere, you know? And I think particularly for people in the Christian church, I think that we're told over and over and over in the New Testament that there's only us, you know, there's just, they're in Christ. For those who are in Christ, there's no male or female. There's no slave or free. There's no barbarian or Scythian. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So the thing is that, you know, there's no culture. There's no gender. There's no, I mean, the thing is we're one. But when I look at the Christian church today, and I'll say this, and this is where I'll get lots and lots of email, is I think we're one of the worst offenders on this. We're one of the worst, in my opinion. I should not be seeing this in my church. I should not be seeing this within faith settings, Christian faith settings, but I see it more and more and more. And sometimes we say, well, you know, it's us, the Christian, against them out there. But the reality is I see all of these communication pitfalls. I see overgeneralization. I see sarcasm. I see straw men. I see interrupting. I don't see discussion. I don't see trying to draw people in to an understanding of what our views are and things like that. I just see, you know, we're in a battle against this horrible enemy and we have to destroy them. But, you know, when that's everything, when that's you against the school board, and when that's you against your family member, and that's you against your government, and that's you against your neighbor, it's really just all that's left is you.
Well, Matt, I'm going to disagree with you on that. No, I'm just kidding.
That's pretty doom and gloomy here.
I mean, it is. And really, when you set the stage with that as your kind of foundation of entering into every conversation about anything, like, really, you're not going to make progress. And I don't know about you, but I know when I'm in a disagreement with someone that's not going well and I start to act out of character, or, you know, they're behaving poorly, I walk away from that interaction. And if I didn't maintain my self-respect, I feel really icky about it. Like, I do not feel good. That is not how we are supposed to treat other people. You can disagree and still leave the conversation with your dignity intact. And that's really that's what we talk about in therapy, right? Is like, what's your goal of the conversation? What's the intent? What's the purpose of the conversation? And how do you want to walk away from it? Like, how do you want to walk away from this? Do you want to have
that's a really good first point there. Like, why are you having this conversation?
Yeah. So I'll outline the three kind of categories of goals that you can think about when you're having a conversation with someone. And I'm not talking about like any sort of conversation, like a discussion where you need to bring something to someone or someone brings something to you, and it kind of can become a disagreement, possibly. You have to prioritize these three because they're going to be in every, but one is the relationship. Where's the relationship fall in this conversation? One is your self-respect, and the other is the objective. So the actual topic of the conversation. What's the most important in this one interaction that you're having? I know we've been talking about politics and kind of these big conversations, but really you take this down to the granular level and the day-to-day that everyone is experiencing these conversations probably multiple times a day. And, you know, if you have an interaction with a store clerk, you're probably not going to rank your relationship with that person as number one. It's probably the objective of getting your cell phone turned back on. I don't know, I'm picking something. And then two, maybe relationship or your self-respect. Those kind of go hand in hand. But like if you're already upset, maybe it's your self-respect and then the relationship, because if you maintain your self-respect, you're able to be a polite individual. And if you walk away from the conversation, you've kind of achieved all of those things. You can go, okay, I feel like I was able to get my needs met and get that accomplished. And if all else fails, hopefully you can still walk away with your dignity intact. And that's one way to maintain your side of the street, keep your side of the street clean as you're having these conversations. But you outlined, so that's kind of how we help people. If you go into a conversation, if you're not a debater and you go into a conversation and the other person is, and you get overwhelmed, like sometimes we just shut down or we kind of act out. And so having a plan going in, not to beat the other person down, but a plan for yourself can really help strengthen your confidence as you go into this, and then help you leave that conversation, whether there's resolve or not, feeling as though you've effectively entered into this. And maybe that means there were more conversations or whatnot. But you outlined some of the like thinking traps that we fall into, or the ways that we approach this discord in that might have negative impact on it. So let's talk about some ways that you can enter into a conversation effectively to have that conversation. Because really, most of us aren't on TV arguing with people on one of the news channels. Like you're at home or in the workplace having hard conversations with people. And how do you do that effectively?
And what you see on those programs are not healthy interactions.
Absolutely not.
They are set up, staged interactions to be a conflict. They're not healthy debate. They're not set up for that.
No. Screaming and yelling at each other is not.
Yeah. So realize that. I mean, we have to realize that is not, and those people are not representative of the supposed groups that they are part of. They are often the most extreme in an attempt to get their entertainment.
If you think that is how disagreements or hard conversations should be had, you're probably really struggling with those relationships,
right.
and coming to an agreement, because
absolutely.
No one likes to be yelled at. I don't like yelling at people. I feel icky afterwards. I know that's just me, but I would assume most people feel similarly. I feel like, wow, I didn't hold it together. That wasn't great. So what do you do if you know that you struggle with hard conversations, or you're like, I feel like I'm good, but I want to get better? We've talked about this in previous podcasts, but know your emotions. Understand what emotions you're feeling, be able to label them, identify them by name, anger, disregard, sadness, all of those things, and regulate yourself before going into a conversation, or if you're in the conversation, before responding to that person. You don't have to shoot back and forth real quick responses like you see on TV shows, or maybe what you're doing in your personal life. You can say, I need a minute to think about that. Like, I want to respond thoughtfully as opposed to like a knee-jerk reaction response. You can practice active and reflective listening. Now, when you put this into practice, it feels very therapeutic-y and it feels kind of like, silly. But what happens when people are arguing is, like, if I'm telling someone, say, Matt, I'm giving you an argument, but you already didn't agree with me. So you're not really listening to what I'm saying. You're only thinking about what your next statement to me is going to be. Therefore, you heard nothing that I said. You have no ability to understand it because you didn't hear it. And we're less likely to be able to compromise because one or both parties is not listening. They're not actively engaged in listening to what the words coming out of the other party's mouth are. And then taking it a step further, it's not just hearing those words, but actually being curious and understanding what they're trying to say. What are their needs? What are the needs that they are asking to be met? Like, what is actually happening? Why is this happening? It's a very common therapy term. Be curious, not furious, right? So if you can ask questions and try to understand as opposed to getting really upset off the bat, like, you're more likely, because if you're saying, I'm trying to understand you, like, I need to ask a few questions, you're more likely to, one, get a better perspective, get their perspective understood a little bit better. And you might be able to actually make some headway on getting to an agreement. we've also talked about this next one in past episodes, but owning your own emotions. So not only identifying them, but don't put it on other people. You're pissing me off, or you're making me mad, or you did this. Like, no, I'm upset right now, or I'm sad. I need to pause. Like, these are my emotions. I need to cope with them. Don't blame them on other people, because when we do that, we typically fail to actively use an effective coping skill, right? We're just deflecting our emotions out onto other people. And then set boundaries. Set boundaries with someone, because if you, whether that's your spouse that you've been married to, like maybe you have things that you wildly disagree on, and you're like, I just don't want to get in that conversation because we're not going to agree. And it's really novel, not important to the longevity of our marriage. So you set that boundary of like, I'm going to have 2 minutes of, conversation, and then I'm going to step away, right? Like, you don't have to verbalize that, but you know where you're willing to go and where you're not willing to go. And then finally, accepting unresolved disagreement. Like, that's why I brought that kind of example up earlier about marriages, because healthy marriages, both parties understand that the other person doesn't think exactly the way they do. So you may have disagreements that go unresolved for your entire marriage, or you just have differing views, right? Now, there's certain topics that you need to understand and agree on in some sense, but being able to understand that we may not totally agree on this topic, and we can still move forward, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm so angry and upset because you do not agree with me. You did not change your mind, because the more I argued, the more you dug your heels in, right? Like, if you can say, all right, I hear that. It's not how I think about it. This is how I think about it, and then have an actual conversation, you might be able to live with that uncertainty.
I think you make a good point there at the end. I think one of the problems is that people, and obviously not every conversation you have is a debate, although unfortunately I see that more and more. But I think the problem is people go into this discussion, they recognize that the person across from them has, very different view. And they don't go into the conversation with the idea that we're going to have a conversation with the goal of understanding each other's position.
Correct.
They go into that conversation with the idea of either I'm going to convince this person that I'm right, or this conversation is only an effective conversation if we both come out of it absolutely agreeing on this point. And that's not what the conversation is for. The conversation is so that they will understand what your position is and why you hold that position, and you will understand what their position is and why they hold that. And then if you, in your mind, when I say that, if you go, well, I don't care why they hold their position, I know I'm right, well, there's no reason for you to get in the conversation.
Right.
And so, I would say just the other day, I had something happen to me. So I had someone that I know really well, a friend of mine, said something to me about something that he believed that was frankly, very extreme and very offensive to my kind of views. And the reality is, I don't care why he believes that. I don't agree with him, but he's my friend, and I want him to still be my friend. I was not interested in having a conversation with him about it because there's no reason to go there. And so
Right.
all I said was, hey, you know what? I'm just not smart enough to totally understand all that myself, complex issue, and just moved on. And that was it. That's the end of that. And so
You didn't tell him that he was wrong and
right, I didn't tell him
and then start arguing with him.
Exactly, because where's that going to? I mean, I don't understand. I appreciate that other people don't all hold my opinion of everything, and that's okay. And I hold opinions that they don't hold. Those are my opinions. Like, I'm not a particularly political person. I will have a conversation here and there with very close friends about politics, but I don't like to talk about politics. I have my opinions, and they're my opinions. I don't care if you agree with them or not. We could still be friends.
Sure.
I don't really want to talk about politics. I find it depressing. Okay, I'm not going to allow politics to be a dividing factor between me and anyone else.
But for some people, it is.
And for some people, it's the issue. And so is religion, or so is, different kind of things.
Well, there is a statement to be made there around what you're saying is everyone's going to have their own topics,
right?
That they do care that, I'm not going to be friends with someone who is a Nazi. I'm trying not to get too political here, but you're not going to say, I don't care, for me at least, and I'll say this. I'm not going to say, I don't really care why you're a Nazi and why you think that way. We can still be friends. No, I hold boundaries based on my moral values, right? And so
Right.
there are
No,
going to be
I
things that you
understand.
do set those limits.
I think what you're saying is that there is a threshold
Yes.
at which you would say, and in this instance, you define that as a 1942 Nazi. So,
That's it. Yep.
so yes,
That's my
there's a
only
threshold.
boundary with
Excellent.
friends.
I'll give you an actual example. Okay, this is just from my weird examples of life. When I lived in Louisiana for 10 years, okay, and a friend of mine, his next door neighbor was David Duke, if you know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
David Duke was the grand wizard of the KKK at one point, and he ran for president, and it was all a whole KKK thing. And my wife walked out of a pharmacy one day and literally walked right into David Duke, and she had our daughter, and he's like, "Oh, what a cute baby!" And he was coming out of a restaurant with some guys, and he was so kind and nice. And we're not going to be friends with David Duke. Okay, he holds some views that I find so offensive,
right,
that I would not want to have a relationship with him. And I'm not interested in knowing why he holds those views. And I don't care if he knows why I hold my views. I'm not going to have a social, communal relationship with him because I find his views that offensive. And that's what you're saying. There's a threshold.
right.
But the thing is the threshold is not you're in one political party and I'm in another. That should not be the threshold.
It is for some, though.
I've seen that be the threshold.
Mhm.
The threshold should not be you're a Methodist and I go to the Lutheran church. Okay, that's anti-biblical. Okay, that's anti-Jesus. Okay, and so I've seen it be at that level. It should not be that whatever. I mean, these are trivial matters.
And that doesn't mean don't have conversations. We're not saying don't have conversations or that you shouldn't. If you're genuinely interested in understanding a person's perspective and that you disagree with, that you may not think you'll change your mind, but you see documentary people or investigators or authors go and have these conversations because they're genuinely interested in understanding that person's perspective and where it comes from. That may not change their boundaries or their understanding of that concept, but those individuals hopefully engaging in these conversations really because they're curious. They're not trying to make a point. So there's these different ways of having conversations and the intent behind them, which is why I outlined earlier those three things. How do you categorize these three? How do you rate these for this conversation? The objective, is it to get information, or is it to get a raise, or is it to tell someone that they've hurt you? Maintaining the relationship needs to be considered in that conversation. And then your self-respect, right? So those are the three things. If you go in paying attention to those three things, the objective changes with every conversation, but you can really develop some skills to have healthy conversations.
One of the things, you have to listen for understanding before you respond. You're trying to understand why the person believes what they believe. But again, if you begin the conversation in your mind, if you're saying, I don't care why they believe what they believe, don't have that conversation. There's no reason. That's not a conversation, okay?
No.
You need to separate the person from the position, particularly in the context you need to really think about or name out shared values. I mean, the majority of people in the United States, the vast majority, 99.99% of people in the United States, wake up in the morning and they want to be nice to people. They want people to be nice to them. They want to have a job where they can make enough money to live comfortably. They want to raise their children to be better off than they are. They want to have relationships with people that are pleasurable and fulfilling. And they're mostly like you and me. And we're mostly like each other, even when we hold diametrically opposed views on some topic. And we've got to remember that, and so when we refer to our political opponents as our enemies, then we've already crossed the line, we've
really diminished our true enemies' positions,
Absolutely. And so, I think we have to remember that. Now, I'd like to kind of here at the end, kind of just get back to this idea of, how this affects our mental health, and it really does. So I listed out a few things here, the kind of the consequences of that. And I think all of these, you'll see everyone out they'll probably know examples of this. I mean, as a result of this us and them kind of mentality and this inability to disagree or hold different opinions, we see an increase in anxiety and anger. And you see that all across our culture and our society right now. We see strained and broken relationships. I literally was just yesterday, okay? Just yesterday, I won't say who it is, but I follow a certain kind of classic rock performer because I kind of like classic rock. I'm an old guy. And he has a Twitter account and he gets on and he talks about different kind of stuff. And literally he got on Monday of this week. The week we're recording this is the week after Easter. And he got on and he just kind of commiserated about how sad it was to see that families weren't getting together over this holiday because of their disagreements on politics primarily, but other things. And he said, this has even happened to my own family. There are people that we didn't see because they don't agree with us. And he was very emotional. It was really kind of sad. And I just thought, that's really sad. And I know I hear other people tell me the same thing. So-and-so didn't come for Christmas anymore. So-and-so doesn't come for this holiday or that Thanksgiving because they get into arguments with everybody and they don't, so strained and broken relationship, chronic stress and emotional exhaustion, reduced ability to think flexibly, loss of trust for others. I see that a lot. And then you just have these conflict cycles that continue. So all of that is very negative towards not only your mental life, but your physiology. I mean, it leads to greater cardiovascular problems and all types of things. So we are a stressed out lot, might we say. And a lot of that comes from this just absolute, we are circling the wagons every minute and trying to keep those out there, the thems, from getting to the us. And a lot of times the arguments are so trivial. I mean,
well, it's self-induced stress.
Absolutely. I mean, we got enough stress, just generally, not to worry about whether, you're for some bill and I'm not for that bill, or I voted for this guy and you voted for that guy. And I mean, come on, man. I tell you what, I can give you a lot better things to argue about than that. I mean, that's meaningless at the end of the day. Now, I know I just said that as somebody out there's like, I can't believe that now that's the whole point where that's my view. That's my view. And hey, you're listening to our podcast. A podcast are the opinions of somebody else. And you don't have to agree with them, but, if you listen, you must listen for a reason. So I would just say that, as you're having these conversations, particularly with family members, just remember you have far more in common than you have different. And the us and them mentality is always going to lead to division and conflict, particularly if we're people of faith. We have to do better. We have to recognize that the thing that binds us together is so much more important and really uncomparable to the things that might divide us. And we have to focus on that. So, I'm not saying avoid any kind of discussions that might feel uncomfortable or icky or whatever.
Not at all.
But I would say I choose my battles. Yeah. I mean,
that's a hill you're willing to die on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes it is,
Absolutely.
But it can't always.
And I think that's another thing to ask yourself. When was the last time you were in a conversation like this? And how often does it happen? If it happens a lot, you're the problem. Okay. And so there's no other way to say it. I mean, if it happens all the time, it's you. Okay. It's not them, it's you. And you have to recognize that and you have to change that. If somebody holds to a deeply held belief, you're not going to change their mind. The only thing you can do is help them understand why you believe what you believe and be happy with that.
Sure.
That's the end of the story right there. And I guess that's the end of the podcast. So thanks for joining us on Madness and Grace. We may have not helped you at all. We may have not helped ourselves at all. Maybe we'll go get in an argument right now over some matter. But hopefully, if you use some of those ideas, and particularly the idea that, we have more shared values than we have different, we might do a little bit better talking to each other. And really, that's what Jesus wants. He prayed that we would all be one within the church. And I think that's important. So let's start with the family of faith. Let's get along. Let's focus on what's important. And let's show others. I mean, Jesus did say they would know we were his disciples by the way we loved one another. And I don't think we're doing it very well. So join us again on Madness and Grace.
Thanks for joining our conversation on this episode of the Madness and Grace podcast. If you found value in our discussion today, we'd love it if you'd subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps others find these important conversations.
Sharing this podcast with friends and family members is also a wonderful way to extend hope to those who might be struggling with mental health concerns.
We'll be back next time with another candid conversation about madness and grace. See you then.